And that day, I get an email from my Ford GT concierge. Being in the exotic car sales world for 6 years, obviously there's a lot of deals that sort of stick out as being those really, really fun ones. But I think the most fun that I ever had selling a car was a South Georgia billionaire that decided he wanted a new Aston Martin DBS. And he decided he was going to trade several American cars that he wasn't driving very much and have this new British GT comfortable car that he could put some miles on. And so he called up and he said, hey, I don't want to come up there and do this. Do you mind just shipping me the DBS and I'll fly my jet up to Peachtree DeKalb Airport and you can bring 4 of your guys down and I'll fly them to my house, pick up the cars, and you can drive them home. And we said, of course, that sounds terrific. We'd be more than happy to get on your private jet and fly down to your plantation and bring some cars back. And so we went up and he had this barn just full of perfectly detailed, not terribly old, American cars. And he was trading a newer GT500 Mustang, a Boss Mustang Laguna Seca package, an 0607 Z06, and a 2005 Ford GT. And so we're driving all these cars up, and at the time that was about, I believe, an even swap. This was at the very bottom of the Ford GT market. The car at the time was probably worth $130,000 to $140,000. And obviously at their peak, they were well over $300,000 for any of them, $450,000, $500,000 if it was a low mile heritage car. The 4 of us set out driving, and I think I started in the Z06, but I ended up spending most of the time in the Ford GT. And I'll confess that the Ford GT40 is amongst the most beautiful cars ever made. And since the GT looks pretty much just like the GT40 in a slightly larger and very slightly more modern iteration, I think it's a very beautiful car, but I never really fell in love with it. I mean, compared to the Italian cars of the era, which obviously I love, it just didn't quite stir my soul in the same way. But of course, in the wake of September 11th, the idea of an American sports car was really, really interesting. So there was some initial enthusiasm, and then they got cold as ice and you couldn't sell them worth anything. And now obviously they've become very appreciated by collectors. There's not a whole lot of people, Doug DeMuro accepted, that put a ton of miles on them just as their favorite cars on earth, but there are some cool things about them. But it's a strangely constructed car, and amongst them, because there's only 4 options and only a handful of colors, there's not a ton of diversity amongst them. I mean, if you look 4 or 5 years ago, there were more dollars in Ford GTs on earth than there were F40s. So when you start thinking about more car collector capital being tied up in a Ford GT than an F40, like, that's a pretty crazy scenario. And obviously the market's dialed back a little bit the last couple of years, but it still has been a very interesting automotive value phenomena to witness. And so as we're driving them back, we're kind of racing them back and forth, and the car is pretty much exactly as fast as the Mustang GT500. I mean, they have the same motor and they drove very similarly. Honestly, the Mustang was a little bit more comfortable. So the novelty of the car as a driver's car has always been lost on me a little bit, but I get what it is and what it stands for with respect to American car culture. And so when they announced the new car, I was really excited because I knew Ford in general will knock it out of the park. Then of course they come and say, it's got a V6. With a ton of horsepower. I mean, not a ton relative to some modern cars, but it's pretty fast. But I mean, 600 horsepower for 500 grand when Ferrari just announced a car with 1,000 horsepower that's just over 500 grand is kind of nuts. It's not really what we were expecting, and we didn't know how many they were going to make. But then they come out with this application process. And so I was kind of on the fence, like, I'm not dying to spend $450,000 to $500,000 on a V6 American car. I've never owned an American car other than the 1995 Cadillac Fleetwood limousine that I owned for a month to use for $2,904 at one point. And so, but I figured, look, it's probably going to go up in value. These have, and I do believe a lot in them making this one a good driver's car. Some of my friends were really excited about it, and I had some social media following in 2016, 17 as they were starting to set up the allocations, but mostly just from the Cannonball record, not from anything we've done here with VINwiki. So I was like, well, it's worth a shot. So I filled out an application. At the time, I think I had the roof and the green LP640 and the Cannonball cars and stuff like that. And so put all that in, but obviously I'd never owned a GT or really any Ford product ever. My wife had a 2000 automatic V6 white Mustang convertible when we got married. which I rather immediately disposed of. But that was our only Ford experience. I omitted that from the application and said, hey, I'd love to become a Ford guy. Let me get one of these Ford GTs. So unsurprisingly, like most of the people you saw complain about it on YouTube, I got denied. But I figured, well, whatever. I wasn't even sure how I was going to buy a $450,000 car. Pretty much all the cars I'd had up to that point had been massively leveraged through exotic car financing. I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to call Premier Financial Services and say I need to get a deposit to finance that before I actually can finish paying for the car in a couple of years when it gets there. But they come out about a year ago saying, we're going to allocate another 350 cars. Well, I've now got more of a social following, I suppose. Why don't I try again? And I also knew that about 70% of the people that had been approved for the new cars owned an '05 or an '06. And I had a customer who's like one of the biggest Ford buyers in the state of Tennessee. And he had been denied. And he had an '06 GT. Every collectible Mustang, Focus RS, anything his Ford dealer ever told him to buy, all the way down to his favorite Harley-Davidson F-150, he bought these cars, drove them, loved them, and was their best customer. But not even the owner of their dealership could get one, and so he did not receive one. So he was a little bit bitter about this, and he was like, man, I think I'm going to sell this GT. And I said, well, I'll tell you what. Why don't we say, for this application's sake, it's mine, and if I get approved, then I'll trade you some VINwiki equity or something for it. Like I'll get the car, finance it, whatever we got to do. I'll have yours, and I'll say it's mine, and maybe it'll get us a car that you weren't going to get, and I didn't think I was going to get. So I put that on the application and sent it off. So I send it off and wait through it. I don't get any response, and I start to see people posting on Instagram their updated denial letter, but I didn't get one. And a few days go by, and I asked some friends that work at Ford, like, do you know anything? Am I going to get one? And they're like, we don't know yet. Just sit tight. Well, a few more days go by, and I finally get the, Dear John, you're not going to get a Ford GT letter. And I'm like, oh, well, darn it. I guess I'm not going to have to call Mitch at Premier and try to get some monster loan. So probably better for my financial circumstance, even though I'd seen all these crazy rumors that people were trying to flip them and making a lot of money. But it was still unclear, especially with eventually 1,350 cars, what it was going to be. So, all right, well, whatever. So I told a friend of mine at Ford that knew I'd been applying and had kind of told me who to talk to and stuff like that I didn't get one. Oh, well. So I go on, I continue looking for other cars. I start really shopping a little bit harder for a 430 Scuderia because I really wanted one of those, and had gotten to the point where I'd agreed to buy the gray one. And that day, I get an email from my Ford GT concierge that says, you've been allocated a car and I'm going to be your representative, or this is how you contact to spec out your car. And it's going to be a late 2021 production slot. Fantastic. Now I got to figure out how to find $500,000. Okay, we'll start working on that. So I forwarded that email to my friend and I was like, what's going on? I mean, I got the denial letter, but now I have an approval letter. Do I get one, or were they right the first time? So he says, let me do some digging. And in the meantime, I start digging in because the form of the email was pretty much exactly like the denial one. It was almost like someone had taken it, copied it, and I thought this could be a scam. That someone's sending this to people they assume would have applied for one, and they're going to ask me to send them the deposit. Because at one point, I think the deposit was half the purchase price at the time that you put your order in. I'm not 100% sure that was going to remain the case, but I knew that was going to be a problem for me. And so I didn't know what they were going to propose. So I started looking, and FordGTConcierge.com was like a very recently registered domain with GoDaddy, and it didn't have anything sitting on it. So it seemed like, man, these guys have pretty elaborately concocted some hoax or some scam, and they're going to try to make me send them a deposit, which I was like, that's going to make for a great story. So I'm kind of waiting to hear back from my guy before I start engaging with them. But eventually I'm like, whatever, I'll send them an email now. I'll say, great, I'm so excited. I mean, I got this denial letter on this date, but like, I'm really excited that you guys found me one. Let's make it happen. I want an orange one. So eventually this guy comes back. He's like, actually, no, you were right on the cusp. And then they watched the Lamborghini prostitute video. And apparently, they found that somewhat distasteful. I thought I tiptoed around all the sensitivities very well, but I guess Ford didn't enjoy that story. So apparently that's what they had gotten upset about, and that I was just that close to being able to get the new Ford GT. And I'm like, well, they're saying that I am, so I'm just going to wait and see what they say. Maybe there's, right hand not talking to the left hand situation. And so they, a couple days later, send me a response, not asking me for an initial deposit of $10,000 or whatever a scam might seem like. And he had said, no, that was the real email that went out that day to let everybody know what the concierge arrangement was and how they were going to order their cars and when their spec kit was going to arrive and all the things, whatever. They understand that you're interested. They understand that you'd still like one. So apparently there is still some hope. And so it's not 100% a no as I understand it. They have some, I don't know, and maybe this video will either confirm that I would like to have a Ford GT if anybody's out there allocating them. I think it'd be a great car, and I think long-term collectability and the ability to accumulate miles on a hypercar performance level car is there. So I'd love to have one. So I don't know if there's a few more they might allocate, if there's some press cars that might be available, or if they might be thinking about kicking somebody else that has questionable internet content out in favor of my hopefully unobjectionable content moving forward. But for those at Ford, I would love one of your cars. I still haven't bought another Ford product, but if you would like to give me one, I promise I'll put an awful lot of very fast miles on it.
Are you looking to buy your dream car? Premier Financial Services offers the flexibility of financing with the tax benefits of leasing. The PFS Simple Lease offers quick approvals and easy termination when you are ready for the next car. Visit our website and follow us for more.